Hello everyone, my name is Kateřina Pekova. I'm Tech Community Manager at STRV. I would like to welcome you all here. It's really nice to see such a great show up, and I hope that you will all enjoy this talk without any major technical issues. So firstly, I would like to establish just some few rules how you can interact with us or with another attendees, so your event is as lifelike as possible in these conditions. Your first option is to raise your hand if you have any questions. You can do that by raising your hand and we will call you up, unmute you, and you can ask the speaker directly. Also, you have an option to ask in the Q&A section, and we will get to your questions when it's question time after the talk, or you can interact with others in the chat. Just be careful to address your message to the people you want to address your message. So you have a chance to, you have a possibility to address it to the panelists or to panelists and attendees. So make sure that you are sending it to the right person. So that's towards that, I would like to encourage you to ask as many questions as possible or interact with us. Feel free. We are also checking the questions in our YouTube stream, so you can also ask there. Okay, that's it. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Tina Stremenova, and our iOS developer, and along with her, Jan Kalton, our iOS platform lead, whom I would like to give a word right now. So thank you very much, guys, and enjoy.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm going to keep it short because I'm sure that you want to hear the talk and not myself. I'm Jan, I'm the iOS platform lead here at STRV, and I'll be your MC today, which basically means I will introduce Tina and then ask her questions that she'll ask me in the chat later on. Tina is an amazing engineer, an amazing iOS developer here at STRV, and I can vouch for the fact that she knows pretty much everything about in-app subscriptions. So I'm really looking forward to this talk, and with that, Tina, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I will share the screen so you can see my presentation. Okie dokie. Right. So we can start, I guess. So my presentation, as you might all already know, is about in-app subscriptions. I will be more specifically talking about auto-renewable subscriptions, but a lot of stuff that I will be talking about will apply also to non-renewable subscriptions. So before we jump on the subscriptions, just let's briefly go through introduction of in-app purchases in general. It will be really quick, as I'm sure like most of you know what in-app purchases are, but just to be sure. So what are in-app purchases? We have them on iOS, we have them on Android even, we have them on iPad OS, Mac OS. So it's basically its tool, and we will be talking about Apple in-app purchases. I mentioned Android, but we will be talking about Apple. So it's a tool for developers to implement purchases to sell digital content. And this is really important, this digital content part, because you have to sell either like access to services or digital content. You cannot just sell shoes. So yeah, Apple in-app purchases can be implemented on iOS, iPadOS, macOS, etc., all platforms of Apple you can imagine. I will be mainly focusing on iOS, but a lot of stuff I'll be talking about is applicable to like Apple Watch, iPadOS, of course, and other platforms. So also, two concepts I will be talking about a lot are Apple ID and receipt. We cannot talk about in-app purchases without those two. So to establish Apple ID, we all know what Apple ID is, but it's important to know that purchase is bound to user's Apple ID. So whatever app you have with whatever user's account in that app, for example, Facebook account, Google account, etc., in-app purchase is primarily bound to user's Apple ID. The second concept, the receipt, is really important because basically we will be talking about the receipt all the time, as this is a document that holds all the data about transactions between a specific app and specific Apple ID. So for example, let's say I have my Apple ID, Tina something, and I have some app. For example, I would have, I don't know, Duolingo. And if I purchase something, I'm purchasing it for my Apple ID first, not for that account I have in Duolingo app. So, and mainly a receipt is created. That's the important part, that receipt is creating with that purchase. And this receipt holds information about the purchase. What is important to know is that the up-to-date receipt is always stored on Apple site, on somewhere on Apple servers, let's say, and physical app in your, the app in your device usually has a version of the receipt. What does this mean? We will reveal later, but mainly it can happen that the receipt in your device is a little outdated. To not have outdated receipt, receipt is being refreshed on or fetched from Apple on certain occasions, like for example, user is making a purchase, or user is restoring purchases by restore button, or by basically app explicitly refreshing receipt. App can do that, or we have tools for that. So that's how we keep receipt up to date. And also what's really nice to mention, and I would really love to know that before I started developing with in-apps or developing in-app purchases, is that especially for Apple in-app purchases, there are a lot of rules, strict rules for implementing in-app purchases. So Apple strictly defines like what you can sell and what product you need to use, product type you need to use to sell that content you are selling. And it's really important to read as much guidelines and documentation as possible before you start implementing something, because Apple is really strict on this and can just reject your app for anything. Also, there are really nice features coming with in-app purchases. We will not be talking about those really in this talk very much, but what is really nice feature for subscription is introductory offers. So for example, you have like monthly subscription, and you can have like for first two payments some kind of discount, which is nice for motivating users to buying your subscription. And a really nice feature that was mentioned on the latest WWDC is family sharing. But we will not be focusing on the features that much. As I mentioned, there are some products. So if you are selling anything through in-app purchase, you are selling in-app purchase product. So first you need to create the product to display and sell it in-app. And those products can have 4 types. So consumable product you can consume. I think most of us know, like for example, you have Pokemon Go app and you buy Pokecoins, and you can consume it in the app by buying, I don't know, Pokeballs. Then you have non-consumable product, which is usually you purchase it once and you should be able to have it forever, as long as you have the app installed. And then auto-renewables or auto-renewable subscriptions, which we'll be talking about a lot. So basically it's a subscription. You unlock or give user access to certain type of service or content for a certain period of time. Auto-renewable subscription renews periodically, and non-renewing subscription, it just does not renew. So it's just like the period ends and nothing happens. I mean, you can offer to user to purchase like this product one more time or to purchase something else, up to you. So this was a brief introduction. Let's jump into the subscriptions. So this is again definition of the subscription. It's I will be repeating myself, but what is important here is like with subscriptions, auto-renewable subscription, but also non-renewable, user can purchase access to services or periodically updated content. So this is important to know like when you can and cannot use subscription. So for example, if you have some ebook that you are selling within the app and it's just one ebook, you cannot apply subscription to that because you need to continuously provide some value for the subscription. Like user should be able to use that value of the subscription like every month or every week, well, every time. And therefore you cannot just like give them one book that they read and they have nothing to do with it. Basically, Apple would reject this, I think. Oh, well, I know about that. So it's important to know what you can use subscriptions for. Also, what you can do with subscription, or more likely what user can do with subscription. So user can, of course, purchase subscription, and user can restore subscription. Restoration is a functionality you are obliged by Apple to implement when you are selling subscriptions or non-consumable products. And this means like when user purchases new device, when they purchase a new device, they want to have those purchase subscription there. So for this, they are using a restoration button. You tap on that, it restores your subscriptions and you're ready to go. We also have kind of like, not edge cases, but this is really specific for the subscription, and it's cancellation. User can cancel their active subscription in App Store settings, which is unfortunate for us as developers because, yeah, they won't give us their money. And the second thing is that it's kind of tough to handle sometimes, the cancellation. We will talk about it later. Another specific function for subscription.
Tina,
yes.
We have a question that we think we should answer right now.
Okay.
Dmitry is asking whether on-device receipt validation will be covered in this talk or not.
On-device receipt validation, we will be talking more about server-side validation, if that was the question aiming for. So basically, no, but we will be talking about a lot about validation.
I think we can send some resources after, right?
Resources?
Some article about this.
Oh, right. Yeah, I can for sure find something. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Please carry on.
And thank you for the question. Yeah, I was talking about the upgrade, downgrade, crossgrade. Those are really nice functions of subscriptions, and they are mainly really nice for the users, but they are also nice for the developers. So we will be talking a little bit more about those on next slides. We have also some really unfortunate cases that can happen with subscription. First one is not really limited to subscription, but what can happen is refund. Refunds do not happen very often. But like, for example, I, in my life, bought 2 subscriptions only and got refunded 1. So for me, it's like 50-50. But it's something that developers should handle, because like, imagine that user started a monthly subscription and you unlock the content for the user, and then user cancel it with Apple support and they got refunded, but you do not know about it. So you still continue to give this user access to subscription content, which is not nice for you. But it's like nice for user. So another use case that can happen is failed renewal. This is a little more, a little easier to handle than a refund. But it's like unexpected situation. Like it can happen that after 3 renewals, user runs out of money for some reason. And yeah, it does not happen, and you should stop letting user access the content. And this is specific mainly for the subscriptions, only for the subscriptions. So I was talking about the upgrading, downgrading, and cross-grading, and those are operations or processes are really like tightly connected to subscription group. So what is subscription group? Like I think anyone here who already did at least one subscription ever had to make subscription group. So basically, in the past, when you had multiple subscription products per app, like to be more specific, for example, you can have monthly subscription and you can have annual subscription. So those are 2 products. And in the past, what happened was that before user, if user wanted to go from monthly subscription to annual subscription, because like annual costs less money, they would need to first cancel their active monthly subscription and then purchase the new subscription, the annual one. But what this caused were issue when users forgot to cancel the active subscription and they had 2 ongoing subscription at the same time, which is not really good for the user. I mean, for developers, not that bad, because you are getting like double money, but it's not really good user experience, and you do not want to want user to have bad experience in your app. So for such cases, subscription groups were introduced some time ago by Apple, and subscription group handles exactly this case. So in subscription group, you can have multiple subscription product. As I mentioned, you can have like monthly subscription and annual subscription, and those 2 subscriptions cannot be active at the same time. And this is great for user. So this means that if you are offering those 2 products in app and user currently have monthly subscription on, they can just purchase the annual subscription and everything is done. Like they don't have to do anything else. The switch is made. So that's great. So basically the subscription group gives rules to the subscriptions inside of it. For example, another thing which is great for us developers is that if you are offering some trial version for your subscriptions, a user can use this trial version only once per group, so only for 1 subscription. So if you would have like 3 subscription products, user cannot go around them and for every use the trial, which will be like using everything for free, basically. Also, the third thing, and it's not really like a feature of group, but it's something to remember. Don't give your groups strange names, because the name of the group will be displayed until you're under the subscription in the App Store settings, as you can see here on this blurry App Store screenshot. So, yeah. So those are the groups, and we cannot talk about groups without talking about subscription levels, because within one group, and you can have multiple groups, but we will be just talking about one group. And within the group, you have subscription level. And you can have multiple levels, of course. The rules for the level, there can be 1 or more subscription per 1 level. And order of the levels, and by order I mean you can have level 1, level 2, level 3. Oh no, it's level 1, level 2. Okay, so you can have levels. You have levels. They are ordered in certain order, and this order defines what happens when you are switching from subscription from 1 level to subscription from another level. And this is exactly what happens when it's like, this is what I was mentioning, the upgrade, downgrade, and crossgrade. So let's maybe look how, this is how it looks like. This is also use case of bad naming of subscription group. It's just called tires. It's not really, I don't know, like what user should think if they see it in App Store settings. But basically we have tires subscription group, and we have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, which is a little confusing. And I was also confused a long time ago when creating this app. Basically tier 1 is the least expensive, and tier 3 is the most expensive purchase, the product. It's like all of the products are 1 month subscriptions, but for tier 1 you are getting basically less content as for tier 3. And as tier 3 is the most expensive, I put it on the level 1 because the level 1 is the highest level. And you can see this is the screenshot from App Store Connect actually. And in the subscription group, if you have multiple levels, you can just drag and drop the subscriptions and the levels and everything. So it's really easy to use. And so basically, if you are not me, user who before purchased tier 1, which is on the last level, the least expensive, and they want to purchase tier 2, so switch to tier 2, they are basically doing upgrading. And if they want to, if we have user that has active subscription tier 2, and they want to switch to tier 1 because they want to pay less in this particular case, we would call it downgrading. And imagine, as I said, on one level you can have 1 or more subscription. So imagine you have tier 3 and tier 4 here on one level, on the level 1. So if you would be switching from tier 3 to tier 4, that would be called cross-grading. It will be better explained on the images. But yeah, here are the operations I just explained. So I'm not sure we need to go through that. But the images are great. Those images are not mine. I have it from RevenueCat blog. RevenueCat is really awesome service for handling purchases and managing purchases. I must say I never used it, but I got it recommended from a lot of people, and they have really amazing blog posts about in-app purchases. So in the end of the presentation, I will be linking those blog posts because they're really nice, and look at those images. So this is the example of upgrade. So we can see that we have level 1 and level 2, and we are going from product D to product A. So we are upgrading from lower to higher level. And what is important to look at here is that we bought monthly subscription, and after 2 weeks we decided to go to higher subscription, and the current subscription is immediately canceled, and the reminder of the subscription is refunded to us. And the more expensive, in our case, but does not have to be, more expensive subscription starts to be active immediately. So this is basically nice, because if we go with the plan that product A is more expensive than product D, then user is paying more money to us, which is nice. Then we can have a downgrading situation. So user is going back from product A to product B. Oh no, it's D. From product A to product B. And we see that the switch happened basically, not the switch, but the request to switch happened sometime around here. Don't know what that is. And it did not happen immediately. So the product A, the annual subscription, is still active until its subscription period ends. And then, only then, the shorter or maybe cheaper even subscription starts to be active. So this happens when you're going from higher to lower level. And this is great to know. Also, you can basically set up levels and groups to get the best from the subscription. And then we have cross-grading. Cross-grading is a little strange because operation like upgrade and downgrade is not defined by the level because we have the same level, but it is defined by the length of the subscription. And you are basically going from, if you are going from shorter, or okay, so in this example, let's go by the images so I don't confuse you. So we are switching from one annual subscription to second annual subscription, and they have the same length. So it basically happens as upgrade. The switch is immediate. But if we would be going from annual subscription to monthly, so from longer subscription to shorter subscription, the switch will happen by the end of the longer subscription. So the behavior is downgrade basically. So on the same level, the length of the subscription defines the operation. So I think that's it to those operations. We know what the user can do with the subscriptions, how they can upgrade, cross-grade. We know what groups are and what levels are. Now we can jump into how to design the app with the subscription and develop or implement the subscriptions. So first of all, why we even have designing subscription? I mean, we are not designers, right? Or most of us are not. So I put this here because it happened to me in the past that I did not think as much as I should have about implementing in-app purchase. And I only found out I got it wrong when Apple rejected it. And after a month of implementing purchases, it's really unfortunate to refactor all that and change the product and everything. So my advice here is read App Store review guidelines. There's the source of tremendous amount of information about in-app purchases and what you can and cannot implement. For subscriptions specifically, there are Apple UI guidelines. I will link everything in the last slide of the presentation. So there are really nice guidelines for subscriptions, UI guidelines. You can share this with your designer. And also, it's important to basically know as much as you can. So when you are thinking about implementing purchases into your app, or even if you have some client that comes to you, okay, I want to have this and that purchase or subscription in my app, you should be the one to validate it, like say, okay, yes, this is possible, or no, this is not possible, and propose other solution. And it's sometimes hard to navigate through the subscription if the client has really strange business plan, or like not every business plan fits subscriptions or in-app purchases in general. So it's really not good to know the rules. Also, what is interesting with the subscription, and before you decide like what products you want to have, it's really good to motivate the user or to somehow make user be subscribed over the year. Because by default, for every purchase of in-app purchases, Apple takes 30%. But if you have subscriptions and if user is subscribed over the year, for every next transaction, Apple only charges 15%. So you get more money again. Also, a fun fact, you can have only 10,000 subscription products. It's not only, it's a lot, but we had an app in which this was a limitation. So that can happen as well. This is sneak peek to the subscription guidelines. What is important here are not the pictures, but mainly the text. You always need to explain to user what exactly are they purchasing, for how long, and like what does this mean. Also, if there is like trial or introductory price, you should inform user, okay, this is the trial and you will start paying money since this and that date. Apple checks that. Apple checks UI. They can reject your app if you do not get this right. So let's jump into implementation. So what's basically the implementation flow? If you want to, let's say you have free app, and you decided to add subscriptions to it. So first of all, you need to set up products. As I mentioned, the product is what you are selling. One subscription product is one subscription. So you need to set up one or more products to sell, and you are setting them up in App Store Connect. Then once you have those products created, you need to download them into the app. So request Apple, give me the products, and display those products for user to see in the app so they actually can purchase them. Then of course you need to implement purchase logic. And what is kind of optional, but I would say is in fact required. I mean, Apple won't reject your app because you do not have validation implemented. But you should do that. So you should validate the purchase. Validation does two things. So first of all, it helps you because it's more secure. It validates the purchase that really happened and it's not from like jailbroken device or something. But the second thing is that through the validation, you basically parse the receipt, you decode it, and you can actually read the receipt, because when you are loading receipt, it's just data. And with validation, you can actually decode and read it. So validate. And final step is restoration. You are required to implement restoration for the use case I mentioned before. If user wants to restore their purchases on your phone or for some other reason. Also, what do you need to count with, basically, like to know that it might happen, or although it might not happen often, is cancellation. So user can cancel subscription outside of the app in App Store settings. Also, user might request refund, which is really hard to detect sometimes. Well, all the time is hard to detect. Also, user can change active subscription by upgrading, downgrading, cross-grading. They can do it in the app, so you just handle it. That's good. Or they can do it in App Store settings. Again, outside of the app, so you have kind of less control over that, which is unfortunate. Here's like small diagram from Apple. How does that basically look? But yeah, we will have more diagrams coming. Also, what you would be using when implementing subscription is StoreKit, which is Apple's API for in-app purchases. And I would also recommend the really handy library Swifty StoreKit. It's really nicely implemented. It's really easy to use. And I think it also does the local validation. So you can have like serverless solution, which is nice. So I highly recommend Swifty StoreKit. Also, you will be using App Store Connect, as you will be basically using with other type of purchases, and you need real device for testing, always for in-app purchases. Also, we will be talking about few concepts as payment queue, transaction observer, and receipt. Receipt we also already unwrapped, like what that is. So now I will just briefly explain what payment queue and transaction observer is, although I think like a lot of you know what that is already. So payment queue is basically a transaction queue in your app. You have like this global queue in which are not transaction living, but currently processed transactions are in this queue. And this queue communicates with App Store. Like for example, if you have like this in-app flow, user triggers purchase, and from this purchase you just create payment and you put it into this queue. And this queue handles the authorization. For example, you do not like just manually display face ID check for the purchase and stuff like that. This is handled by payment queue. And yeah, So payment queue is very important. And the second thing that is very important is transaction observer. Transaction observer observes the transactions that are in payment queue. So basically, you are putting the transactions to payment queue, or not just you. It might be basically App Store, because, for example, if subscription is renewed, the renewal transaction will be put into the payment queue. So it's not like initialized by you or user, is it's triggered by Apple. And through the transaction observer, you observe those transactions because they go through different states in that queue, and you need to handle those states. What is also important to mention, this transaction observer should be added on app launch, especially as I mentioned, like what can happen with a renewal, that basically is just StoreKit or App Store through StoreKit puts transaction into transaction observer, and you should handle it as soon as possible. So start observing transaction as soon as you can. So those were the concepts we will be using. Let's just now go through creating products in App Store Connect. What is really important when you are going to implement subscriptions is first step is not creating the product, but first step is signing the paid apps agreement. Because usually if you have a free app created in App Store Connect, it only has free app agreement signed. But this means you won't even see like the auto-renewable subscription product in the menu when you're trying to create in App Store Connect. So first you need to make sure you have this paid apps agreement active. I mean, I know it's yellow and it's pending some user info, but that's okay because there's a lot of user info requested in that form. You just need to make sure it's active, and it only can be set up by the account agent, I think. So if the account agent is your client, you should ask them in advance to do that, because without that you cannot work on subscriptions. So let's imagine we have this paid application agreement active. So let's go to our app and create some subscriptions. So I think this is kind of self-explanatory, but basically, just briefly, you go through the detail of your app and you have this in-app purchase section, and you just add subscription through this plus sign. What is important is what your product ID will be. You cannot see my product IDs because this was actually the real app. I mean, the name is changed. I do not name my apps, my example app. So the product ID is important because we will use it later outside of App Store Connect. Also, what is interesting for this phase is that this phase is always manual, which, I mean, for the subscription, it kind of makes sense, but imagine you're creating like thousands of non-consumable products. That is not fun. And this is something you should mention to your client, for example, when, I don't know, estimating in-app purchases and stuff like that, so they know they still need to be someone to create those products, or they can learn these themselves. So how do we display products in apps? So briefly, we could just ask StoreKit. Through StoreKit, we could ask App Store to give us the products for our apps, but it's not that simple. This is the example of the code. We do this with SK product request. And basically, you need to first have the identifiers. So this is the product ID I was talking about. And it's really important to have those product ID somewhere. So you can have it hard-coded in the app. I'm not sure that's the best way. Or you can have those stored on backend. We usually at STR, we usually have backend for the app. So we ask backend for the IDs, and then with the IDs, we request the products. And you need to hold on to those products because with those products, you will be making a purchase. This is like really simple flow, like have you request product IDs, backend gives you IDs, then you request products from App Store gives you products, and you display products. I would say like this is the simplest part. Then the purchase. Purchase is a little bit more tricky, and it heavily depends on payment queue and transaction observer. So before you can do any kind of purchase stuff, you mainly need to implement transaction observer so you can handle the purchase. When creating purchase, so imagine like user taps on the purchase button somewhere in the app. So this triggers app to create new payment from the product that user selected, and it adds this payment into the queue. And this payment becomes some transaction with some kind of state in that queue, and this transaction is observed by transaction observer. So once you have this transaction in some kind of final state, we will see what that state is. It's good to validate the transaction, so you know like the user really paid the money. And also you want to have like more information about the transaction, especially with the subscriptions. So this is really simple 2 lines of how you make a purchase. You create payment, you add it to the queue. As simple as that. And here is the callback from the payment queue that is from transaction observer. So when you implement transaction observer, you do it by implementing transaction observer protocol. And it has this nice method updated transactions. And we only are seeing the half of the method. It's a long method. I mean, it's not that long, but I added a lot of comments, so you can read later. But basically, usual situation is that if you get some updated transaction or updating transactions from the queue through transaction observer, you want to check state for every transaction so you know how to handle this transaction. First two states I'm showing you here is purchasing state, which means like transaction is in progress. I would say you're good. Everything is going as it should. And then there's this dark deferred state that is not used as much for some apps, but basically this was created because of like parental control stuff. So in case child wants to do a purchase and it needs permission from parent through the ask to buy functionality, which is not like really about subscriptions. But you can check the ask to buy functionality later. The purchase basically waits for parent to approve that. So you should not block the UI and stuff. Just let user know that we are waiting for your mom or dad to approve the purchase. Those 3 here are really important states for handling the purchases. So purchase state can be failed, purchased, or restored. Fail state, transaction can fail for many reasons, like user doesn't have enough money, or user even canceled the purchase in process, or did not authorize, input wrong credentials and stuff, for example. So it's really good to actually check the error that happened and handle the transaction based on that. Like, for example, if user canceled the transaction, I don't think it's needed to display them the error. But in case that they do not have enough money, maybe you should let them know. Or maybe Apple will tell them, but I'm not sure actually, because we did not test this particular use case. What's important here is that what can happen, and this I realized just recently, you can have unknown state of or unknown error. And I did not think much about this unknown error until what happened was that a user contacted us that they purchased, they wanted to purchase a product, money left their account, but they did not get the product. And what we found out was that they actually got the unknown error. And we thought, okay, so transaction failed. purchase did not happen. But in fact, what failed was the connection between App Store and our app. So what is nice to do here is validate the transaction, or even before the validation, because it might happen that the receipt did not refresh. We do not know that. Refresh the receipt. This means like ask Apple for the latest receipt version and verify the transaction. Because it might happen that you will find new transaction in that receipt. So that's good to do. And after you did everything you need to do with the transaction, for this failed state, you need to finish the transaction so it won't stay in the payment queue. And that's the same for the purchased state. So purchase state obviously means that the transaction was success. So in case of success, you should still validate the transaction and let user access the content if the transaction is valid, and then also finish the transaction. So it won't stay in payment queue and you won't be handling it again and again. Because then you would close the app and it would be, once you open it again, it would pop out in the transaction queue, payment queue, not transaction queue. But you know what I mean. And then we have restart state. Restart state is, it's for restart purchases. So if user chooses to restart their purchases, what Apple does, or StoreKit, what StoreKit does, they put all the completed purchases from the receipt to the payment queue, and you will see them as restored. And we will see shortly what you need to do for the restart subscriptions, because it's not that easy. It's not that difficult as well. So that was the purchase. So basically with the purchase, you are aiming for the purchased state. For the validation, you can have local validation, and we can have server-side validation. With local validation, I would recommend to use maybe Swifty StoreKit. It's really nice. On one app, I did both. I think both local and server-side validation. It was a little overkill, but it's an experience. So Swifty StoreKit might be good for the local validation. And I will be maybe talking more about server-side validation. So what's the difference? For the local validation, you validate signature of the receipt locally, and you also parse it locally. For the server-side validation, you are sending the receipt to your server, to your backend, and backend send this receipt, which is like in the form of some data. Backend sends it to Apple. Apple has special endpoint for that. Apple validates, checks whether the receipt is actually valid. And if it's valid, it will send back parsed receipt in JSON file. So for example, what we do on one app, after successful purchase, I just do not tell backend like, okay, so I purchased this and then product. I only send the receipt for validation. Backend sends it to Apple. If it's correct, Apple returns it back with the parsed data, and backend checks, okay, so this is new transaction. So this user purchased this and that product, and I will unlock the content based on that. So I would say if you have backend, the validation part is really nice also for handling some other logic around subscriptions. Yeah. So here on the screen, you can see the code for how you load the receipt. And here is the whole flow of the server validation. So we can see like the flow: purchases triggered, purchases processed on App Store side, basically. Then we get through transaction observer the result of this purchase, if it's successful or even if it's failed but unknown error. We send the receipt for validation to backend. We send it to Apple. Apple returns parsed receipt. Based on the parsed receipt, backend sees like what is the active subscription for this particular user, and also lets app know what is the active subscription for that user. So it's really nice. You are actually moving the logic of handling like checking the receipt to backend. You don't have to do it in app. And this is basic purchase flow from user taps on purchase to update purchase state. It's really similar to this. Yeah. And final thing is the restoration. What the restoration does. So as I mentioned, it's something triggered by user. Apple explicitly, I mean, this is like a gray area, but I don't like gray areas with Apple because usually if it's gray area, it's bad. But Apple does not want you to restore receipt. Like they want user to restore receipt, but app should not do it by itself. Because what the restoration does. So restoration refreshes the receipt. To refresh the receipt, which means fetch the latest version of the receipt from Apple, the app first needs to ask you for credentials to your Apple ID. So imagine that at some point you are doing something in your app and suddenly app decides to refresh the receipt and asks you for credentials, and this is just weird. So that's why Apple wants you to implement this restore button, and users should request restoration when they feel like it and they feel like want to input the credentials. So it won't make sense for the user to insert those credentials. So basically what happens is that user requests a restoration, app creates restoration requests in the store kit, and through the store kit, Apple handles it by basically providing all transactions that were ever completed for this app and this Apple ID to the transaction, to the payment queue, and you have to handle them as a restored transaction, which is the state we saw earlier. And yeah, this was really confusing for me because I was like, okay, so I restored the purchases, so I will only get the transaction there now active, right? No, you will get everything. So there's gonna be a lot of transactions, especially because for subscriptions they renew every month or week. So yeah, it's a lot. So what do you need to do to handle this? When you request restoration and get restored transactions, you also can implement this method for transaction observer. That means that is like payment queue restored completed transaction finished. So you actually know you won't be getting any more transactions in the transaction observer, that the restoration is finally done. And at this point, you should take the transactions that were restored and find the transaction with the latest purchase date, because this transaction when we are talking about subscriptions, this transaction that was lately done is probably the one transaction that might be active at the moment. It does not mean it has to be active, but it might be. So for this transaction, you should check that whether it might be still active. For example, if it's monthly subscription and the transaction was done last week, it's really possible that the subscription will be active because it was only a week ago. So you should again take this receipt. You have send it to backend. Backend finds this. I mean, yeah. So again, the flow I was talking about is more like local validation, that you find the latest transaction. This is what I was doing with the 50 store kit. But again, when you have backend for this, just send them receipt after the restoration. Backend can find the active subscription if there is any and return it to you as a response. So that's why validation is really handy. Okay, so this is the flow. User requests, restoring purchases, request restoration from Apple, etc., etc. Basically, what I just described. I think we can go on other things. So these slides that we just went through are basically like the bare minimum you need to implement But there are also some use cases, as we were mentioning before, that might happen, and you won't handle it by the simple restoration and purchase flow. For example, user can cancel subscription or can change the subscription in their App Store settings. So not in the app, you do not have control over that. User can also request refund, which is like the most dangerous thing. Also, unsuccessful renewal might happen. User does not have money, but this is quite, I think, still good use case and handleable. And also subscription might change on another device, which is really not maybe the usual case. That the user would use 2 devices, like 2 iPhones for subscriptions. I don't know, but it might happen. But really, those are edge cases. So if you only, not only, but if you implemented the regular flow like purchase, validation, restoration, I think you are still good. But still, here are some edge cases that you might want to handle. This is the settings I was talking about. So in App Store app, you can go to App Store settings, manage your subscription. In that, you can cancel your subscription, or you can purchase another subscription, which in this case will probably be, I would say, Downgrade. So yeah, this might happen. And about the cancellation, you won't know about it in the app until you validate the receipt, because you won't get like new transaction in the transaction observer that, oh, this was canceled. You need to actually parse the receipt to check that. My initial solution for this was basically counting on user restoring their purchases. And for a lot of edge cases, it makes sense. Like, for example, if user upgraded to like better subscription, I think like they really want to use the restore button because they want to access the better content. So that makes sense. When user requested the refund, it's not maybe that possible that they will also like do the restoration, but it's also possible that they will not use the app at all, maybe. But there are other solutions. But I just want to mention that counting on restoration is not actually that bad. I did that with other apps. Like, for example, if we had app with non-consumable products, I think like that's good. So one of the solutions is also saving expiration date and validating the receipt on expiration. What does this do, or why this solution? So basically, when the subscription renews, you will get a new transaction in the payment queue. And this transaction might appear in a range of some days, so it won't happen immediately. And it would be good to have the date of expiration saved, so you can start checking whether renewal will happen, because it might not happen, and you do not want to continue to provide the access to the paid content. So this is actually a good solution for handling unsuccessful renewal. But it does not handle the refund, because to get to know that refund happened, you actually need to refresh the receipt or have the up-to-date receipt. And it also doesn't handle changes on other devices, which I'm again, it's edge case, but it does not handle this. Also, you can do it differently. That you, in case you want to validate whether renewal will happen, you can also refresh the receipt. But in case like the refund happened like a month ago, you still just provided paid content to user for free for a month. So it's somehow solution, but it's not a solution as much as it could be. So what happens here basically, every time app becomes active, or if you don't want to do it that often, every time app launches, you can check for saved subscription, whether user have some subscription and what is its expiration date. You can hold that information in, I don't know, keychain, you can hold it on backend, basically. So you can save this information somewhere. And once you see, okay, so the expiration was yesterday, I would say, and I do not have any info about the renewal. So you can either, you do not have to, but you can refresh the receipt and send for validation. The thing with the renewal is that when you get the transaction into your payment queue, it does not mean the renewal did not happen earlier. So your receipt might have this information earlier, but the thing is, and I think it's still the case, that the renewal transaction goes into payment queue after app is opened. So for example, if renewal happened and you had the app opened, it won't go to the queue. It will go then there, if it will appear in the queue once you open the app again, which is interesting. Another solution is validating receipt when app becomes active. So for example, user canceled the purchase in App Store settings on their device, and they open the app, but the app does not know that they canceled the purchase. But the receipt know because it was on this device. So what you can do is just send the receipt for the validation, or validate the receipt every time user opens the app or app becomes active. This unfortunately creates traffic. You are sending receipt every time, and it does not handle the changes on another devices, because if you do not refresh the receipt, you know about stuff that happened on the device. You do not know about stuff that happened elsewhere. But again, it's not that bad solution, because changes happening on other device are really edge case. Again, it also does not happen refund, but that is also an edge case. And final solution, refreshing receipt and validating when app becomes active. This is kind of, I would call, brute force solution, because when you're refreshing receipt every time user opens the app, it will, or it might happen that user will be prompted to input their Apple ID credentials. And that is scary. That it's, I would say, it's not such a good user experience. So here, like, you still need to decide whether you need to know 100% what is user's subscription state, or you want to have better user experience. So solution, there are plenty of solutions. You just, every solution have pros and cons. But the refreshing receipt would handle all the cases, because you would make sure that you have received up to date. So you, if you send it, or if you parse it locally, or if you send it for validation and parse it, you will know exactly what's user subscription state. So this is like, I merged the two cases, the validation of app launch or when app becomes active. I have a wrong title of this slide. So app becomes active, you don't have to refresh the receipt based on what solution you are going with, and you send this for validation. And through the validation, you will get the active subscription. Final solution is using App Store server notifications. I think they've been up since 2017. And recently on WWDC, they introduced a refund notification, although the cancellation notification that was there before was kind of like a refund notification. To be honest, I can't tell you much about this because I do not have like hands-on experience for this, but I will link RevenueCat blog post on this and also the documentation. But I think like this might be a really nice solution. When using the server notification, Apple basically notifies your server that a change has happened. However, to see like what happened exactly, you still need the receipt. So you still need to combine it somehow. But it handles all the cases, and you do not need to all the time refresh the receipt, but you should refresh the receipt only when you know that change happened. So you minimize this confusion of user. Why are you asking them for credentials? So as I mentioned, App Store notifications, like basically notify server about changes. So they allow you to monitor and respond to subscription changes, which I think is awesome. Although from what I read, they are not that awesome. I will skip this. Yeah, here. So here I have 2 links. First one is for documentation, and the second one is RevenueCat blog post about how server-to-server notifications are almost useless. Which, I mean, it makes sense because you would think that, okay, I do not have to refresh the receipt that much, but actually you still do need the receipt. And this is like the quotation from the Apple documentation that it's recommended to use this documentation, this notification in conjunction with receipt validation. This is the flow, how it might look like, but I'm not speaking from experience. So let's say something happens with the subscription, backend is notified, app becomes active, it asks backend, oh, so were there any changes with my subscription? And backend says yes. So in this case, app can refresh the receipt and do the validation with backend, and it will find out what the current subscription state is, which I think is quite nice. And you can only use this case for refund, for example, which I think makes sense. So we are approaching the final state of this presentation, which is testing. Testing in-app subscription was always not so great, not because it would be like a bad process, but mainly because you could never test everything. There were explicitly like usual cases that you could not test. So let's start like who can test. And this is like for all the subscription, I would say. You can create sandbox user in App Store Connect. You can just have a test flight built in which you can purchase whatever and you are not paying. Or you can be purchasing non-release product, which basically you can see in test flight build or the debug build from Xcode. So you do not have to worry about sandbox accounts that much, because I would say sandbox accounts are really not great to handle because you have rules for them as well. So for the sandbox environment, I think like everyone knows what does this mean. So sandbox environment is the test environment for testing the in-app purchases. And first of all, you may or may not create sandbox account. You can use sandbox account or test flight if you are sending the build to your QA. But you for sure need to use the sandbox validation. So as I was mentioning, Apple has this endpoint for validating receipts, and Apple also has the second sandbox endpoint for validating receipts. So this is important. And it's important for app review, because what happened to us, our app actually got rejected because we did not see this in the documentation, although it's, where is it? Yeah, it's in yellow. It was highlighted. So basically what happened was that, of course, you are submitting for review the production app, but in fact on our project we have 4 environments. And for 3 environments, we use sandbox endpoint, and for production, we only used production endpoint. But in fact, you have to have this fallback for this particular status code to the sandbox endpoint. And we did not have this, so Apple could not test purchases. So app got rejected, but it was fortunately really quick fix on backend. So. Also, when testing subscriptions, it's good to know the duration. So for example, the test subscription do not take week or month. They do not last that long. They basically, here you can see the table of the times. So 1 week subscription is 30 minutes, 3-minute subscription in the Sandbox environment. And what is also important is that every Sandbox subscription auto-renews 5 times, and then it does not renew or is canceled. Although, like, a lot of people discuss whether it's a cancellation or it just does not renew. But you can at least test the renewal, so that's nice. I'm not sure if this is like the normal test of cancellation, because up until now there was no other way to test cancellation. But now you can test cancellation. So since iOS 14, if you are using Sandbox user, and you're basically the test file user basically can become Sandbox user, you can now see the same user interface as you would see as a user in App Store setting, and you can cancel or change your subscription. So actually now there is a way how to change this behavior in App Store settings. So this is very nice. And also you can, in this way, test upgrades, downgrades, cross grades. Yep, this I mentioned, and this I mentioned as well. So what's the conclusion here? So really important, I'm saying this for the 3rd time, I'm sorry everyone, but read all the guidelines if you can. It's really, really important. Take advantage of subscription groups and levels. Play with it. I think it's really nice concept. Implement restoration functionality because you have to. Try server-side validation if possible, because I think like you can move a lot of logic to backend, which to me at least it feels somehow more secure, and also it feels lazy. I mean, yeah, backend can take care of that. And also validate both successful and failed purchase for some type of failed purchase errors to be sure that you are providing user with the correct service, content, etc. And also it's good to use validation to update subscription state. And be adventurous and implement server-side notifications. I would like to try that soon. Here I'm linking important links. As you can see, it's mostly like Apple guidelines and RevenueKit guides. They have nice article about groups and levels. Subscription testing guide. I mean, Apple has nice guides. I really like Apple's documentation, but sometimes it's hard to find what you need, although it's there somewhere. So I usually end up on the RevenueKit blog. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Tina. What a all-encompassing presentation. Really nice. Thank you so much for it. I think that we all learned something today, and we have 2 questions. First one is about a receipt, and the second one is about Swift UI. So the first one is, how long is the receipt stored on the device?
So you have the receipt on the device as, okay, so the thing about the receipt is that I think like maybe even people in Apple do not know perfectly what's going on with that thing, because I saw a lot of discussions about the receipt. But mainly, the receipt is stored on the device from the moment either user restored purchases and had some purchase, or from the moment user did first purchase and they did so for the app. And when you uninstall the app, I think the receipt is deleted, because when you reinstall it, you do not have the receipt again and you need to restore the purchases, from my experience. So yeah, it's stored on the device for the, I would say like the app lifetime on the device, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. I hope this answered the question. If not, please ask away or raise your hand. The second question by Franklin is, where would you where would you add the transaction observer within the Swift UI app lifecycle?
This is a difficult question. Actually, I don't know, because yeah, I'm old school and not that into Swift UI much at the moment. So maybe Hamza, you could help me.
I think I can. So with the new app lifecycle in Swift UI, you do have two options. The first one is the old school way. So you can use the UI application delegate adapter property wrapper to basically inject your app delegate into your app struct, the struct that conforms to the app protocol, and then do the stuff in there. And the other option, more Swift UI, I would say, is to simply put it in the initializer of the struct that defines your app, that conforms to the app protocol. And yeah, those two options, and both work. I typically use for things like this, the init. I hope this answered the question. And we have one more question from Dmitry. And he's asking, does the app need to call finish transaction on SK payment queue for all transaction state cases, or just for some of them?
This is a very good question. Not for all the cases. You only should call, and this is explicitly stated in the documentation, although I was kind of on edge with the restoration. But you should only finish the transaction for the failed or purchased transaction, because if you do that for the purchasing transaction, I don't think it will end nicely. I don't think the purchase will finish in a good way. And also, if you do this for deferred transaction, it also might not be a good idea. It's not recommended. So only for the purchase and failed transaction. And also, what is important or recommended mainly by Apple is that do the validation and other stuff you need to do with the transaction before you finish it. So if something would happen, I don't know, for some reason, like you did not have time to validate because app crashed, you did not finish the transaction, the app would crash and you would open the app and the transaction would be there again in the observer, and you have another chance to validate it. So that's nice.
Okay, thank you for the answer. We have no more questions, but let's give it a few more seconds for anyone to either raise hand or finish writing the next question. And if there aren't any, which it doesn't seem to be, I see that I'm quite sure that we all learned that Dina knows pretty much everything about in-app subscriptions. And thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you.
Okay, so I see that there are no other questions, so I think that's it.
There is one for you, actually. And Franklin is asking, where can we get the slides?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we will be sending you the after event email where you will get the slides, the recording, and also all the links that Tina recommended. So you don't have to worry about that. You will be receiving it during tomorrow, probably. And the article about on-device validation, sure. Sure. Everything will be there, don't worry. Okay, so our next event will be next week. The topic will be Instruments 101 with Sebastian Leon. It will be on Thursday at the same time. So if you don't want to miss that, check out our Eventbrite site or event section on our website and just register yourself, and we will be looking forward to see you there. And since we want to be proud of everything we are doing, we will really appreciate your feedback for this event. I'm posting the link to the chat right now, or at least I'm trying. So give me 1 minute. And also when you will finish your Zoom after the event, you will be redirected to the type form as well. So you should be able to get there. So thank you very much in advance. Also, thank you, Tina, for a great talk. Thank you, Honza, for a great moderator. And I'll see you next time. Have a nice evening.
Thank you for joining, everyone, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.